reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to PAX East, Boston. Go Bruins. We're really happy to be up here today to bring you this panel. My name is Garrett Fuller. I work for MMORPG.com. I'm lucky enough to work with these guys all the time. We've been doing this panel at PAX East since the very first PAX East. We hope to keep it alive for a very long time, especially with online games. So, without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists. What I want to do is start on this side with Jeremy Gaffney, who's working on WildStar. You guys saw the game out there, you saw the game on monitors. It's a very cool sci-fi approach to an MMO, and it's really neat. And next is John Peters, who's working on Guild Wars 2. It's only because you're launched. You're launched yet. Next, we've been working on games forever. Jack Emmert, working on Neverwinter. The hardest part about introducing Dave is I can't really say what he's working on, but Dave Georgeston from SOE for EverQuest. We're just going to leave it at EverQuest. So I met Chris Roberts back in October at Austin, and my bosses ended up asking more questions about Star Citizen than I did. But Chris Roberts working on Star Citizen did an amazing job of crowdfunding. And some amazing sci-fi stuff out there. The last guy on the panel on the far end asked me to put him on the far end. Matt Fire working on Elder Scrolls Online as well. So with that, we're going to get started with Jeremy, and I know no pressure, no pressure. But we're going to ask Jeremy to start talking a little bit about WildStar and what the game is about and what the project is working on. We're going to go down the line. Each one of these guys is going to talk a little bit about their project, and then we'll open it up to fan questions. So go ahead, Jeremy, kick it up.
So I'll answer with a short, controlled burst so that we can get on to answering questions, because that's the fun part. WildStar, you probably know, fantasy, science fiction, MMO. We're trying to do some cool stuff. We're trying to listen to like what Richard Bartle's been talking about for MMO player types and really give you the ability to choose content based on your playstyle. We're doing all sorts of cool dynamic stuff with changeable role text. You not only can build houses, but you can build whole battlegrounds to go fight head-to-head with it. We use this also to update the game as frequently as possible to really try to make a world that feels alive. Which is probably a good segue over into Guild Wars 2 and what they're doing.
Go ahead, John.
Sure.
Hey, I'm John Peters, working on Guild Wars 2, and like Jeremy said, keeping it short. For us right now, it's all about live world and keeping the world moving and keeping the world feeling fresh, and I think that's where we're headed.
Hi, I'm Jack Emmert. We are getting really close with Neverwinter, which is a Dungeons & Dragons MMORPG that is based upon the Neverwinter IP, which was popularized by Neverwinter Nights. And its biggest unique feature is the user-generated content. You'll be able to create adventures and quests and full campaigns for your friends and for people all across the world.
Give a shout out to Dungeons & Dragons, everybody. I don't think any of us would be in this room if it wasn't for Dungeons & Dragons. That's what I always say. I was 6. Jack played Chainmail. He told me. So it's good. We'll go over to Dave next. But unfortunately, Dave is going to not be able to talk much about EverQuest. So he's going to do his best.
I'm Dave Georgeston. I'm the Director of Development for the EverQuest franchise. So that means EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and the new one that we're building, EverQuest Next. And there's a lot of stuff that we're going into. EverQuest and EverQuest 2 are both still very alive. We still have full dev teams on them, and they're pushing really hard on figuring out how to tell storyline content to players in ways that we haven't done before. And then EQ Next is hard to talk about. The reveal is August 1st this year. But we're re-examining every single element of the MMO, tearing it all the way down to bedrock and rebuilding.
Cool. Give a shout out to EverQuest. That's another one. Chris is making Star Citizen, and he also made Wing Commander, for those of you who don't know that. So I'll let Chris talk a little bit about Star Citizen, which blew us away the first time we saw it.
Hi everyone. So I'm creating Star Citizen, which we actually launched, or we announced last year in October, and have been very successful in crowdfunding it so far, which is amazing. It's the highest crowdfunded game in dollars to date. I don't know if any of you played Privateer a long time ago, or maybe played Freelancer, which were two of the games I did a while ago. But Star Citizen is essentially the game I've wanted to build for the last 20 years, and I always was sort of held back by technology. I don't feel like that's there anymore, so that's what we're trying to do with Star Citizen. My biggest goal is really to try and build a living world. I talked a long time ago about doing this in Freelancer and never actually got to sort of see it through, but I wanted a world that reacts all the time to the players, and the players are generating a lot of content and living their own lives and roles, and there's plenty of things for them to do. If you want to be a pirate, you want to be a merchant, you want to be a lawkeeper, you want to be a bounty hunter, you want to be an explorer, you want to be an industrialist, and do all those sort of things in the realms of space and adventuring around. And do it with a graphical fidelity that is on the cutting edge of PCs, which is sort of what Wing Commanders used to do in the old days. I'm having a lot of fun, and I have to say that the thing that's great about being in a room with all you guys is that the thing that's really fun about crowdfunding it is that you sort of have your community be part of the process, and they're a fantastic sounding board and a fantastic focus group, so to speak, in terms of determining what's the most important functions inside a game. And I think it's very similar to what happens in online games once they go live. But the difference is, if you're doing crowdfunding, it's almost like you have that process, but before you finish it. And it's a lot of fun. But it's my first massively multiplayer game, so I'm supposed to be a fight next to all these people. But I'll try my best to answer things and not sound inexperienced or not knowing what I'm doing. But there you go.
So no pressure on Matt Fiore. He's working on Elder Scrolls. We'll just start with that right there. It's a big IP.
The whole pressure here is going after Chris Roberts, because the man made Privateer, for God's sake. Made Wing Commander, come on. I'm Matt Fiore. I'm the game director on Elder Scrolls Online. It's a game that takes kind of the Elder Scrolls IP that everyone's known and loved forever, and making a multiplayer version out of it. So we have a couple of things that we're doing that are interesting. One is we're going to have a shardless design, so no more shards, no more servers. You just click play and go, which has a lot of technical coolness associated with it. So we're very excited about that. We're also excited about our character development system, where you can basically go in and tweak your character the way you want. If you played Skyrim or Oblivion, you'll get the idea of the way that system works. So kind of opening up a little more freedom, a little more social systems, and bringing it into the MMO world.
Cool. So with that, I'll pose one question, and then guys, if you want to
Just a quick shout out.
Sure.
Ryan, stand up.
Yeah,
So,
Ryan Dancy, stand up.
Ryan Dancy, he's not up here on this panel because we don't have room for him, but he's running Pathfinder Online. For those of you speaking of crowdsourcing,
Yeah.
just thought I'd do a shout out.
No, Ryan. I pulled Ryan out of line because I said, Ryan, come on. So, Pathfinder, how many people in here play Pathfinder? I was a big fan. Huge, right? There we go, see? So cool. Let's get the questions set up. What I want to do is I'm going to ask one question to kind of start out. And I started playing online games with Ultima Online back in '97. I made the leap for a few years later to Dark Age Camelot, which forced me to love PvP. No comment, Matt. No comment. My wife and I spent many nights playing Dark Ages. And then since Dark Ages, I went on to City of Heroes, Asheron's Call, Lord of the Rings Online, Dungeons and Dragons Online. And then I got this job, and now I'm stuck playing everything I can get my hands on. So with that, what I really want to ask you guys first is, what do you guys see in the next couple of years in terms of online game worlds? I almost say, I mean, with MMORPG, almost seeing the concept of a world built, a persistent world built more and more and more. And I think it's becoming a big deal for the fans and for players as well. So you can start it off, Jeremy. We'll talk about that for a few seconds, and then we'll go right to questions.
Yeah, I think actually the panel is a good representation of what we're going to see. You're going to see more dynamic content. You're going to see more user-generated content. You're going to see games coming out that are largely focused on PvP, like Dark Age Interchange's been doing. And there's a reason for that, you know. It takes frickin' forever to make a whole bunch of leveling content. And people play it once and then they get bored rapidly, or, you know, I think we're seeing an era now where you're going to see a lot more ways of making the game where you're either co-creating with fans, or you're going to have dynamic stuff so that you're not seeing, you know, the investment in the hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. So I think the games that we have here are a good example of maybe even the last era where you start seeing those huge investments in all those hundreds of hours of play, and you start seeing more of, you know, what Jack's doing with Neverwinter Nights, which is letting users get out there and actually make stuff.
Well, John, do you want to hit something? You with Guild Wars right now, you're seeing a lot, so you're out there with everybody.
I was just going to say, I think, you know, you see this argument a lot on Garrett's forums. The sandbox versus theme park games, you know, like I think we're going to see a lot more like those, you know, like we've seen a lot of like AAA, like really high quality, you know, theme park type of games. And I think you were saying, Jeremy, that's going to kind of usher in an era of more like high quality sandbox games, where people actually spend time working on that because the investment like just pays itself back because players have a thing that they can kind of do on their own. So, but I also think you're going to see more just online worlds, not just necessarily RPGs, not just necessarily the type of games that we're playing right now. Just, you know, different genres of games and different types of games. And I mean, I've been playing a couple of like what I would consider almost online world games just on my phone, right? So it's gonna be a pretty different landscape in a few years.
I think you bring up a good point, Jack, when it can lead to you, because the Foundry system in Neverwinter really represents how the players can create their own worlds. So I think that's the next step.
I hope. That's exactly what we anticipated we actually had user-generated content in our thought process for a long time at Cryptic, and when the opportunity to get an IP like Neverwinter came along, it made sense with what our thoughts of where the industry might go. I also think that there are two other elements. One is the proliferation of different game types into MMOs. We see this with first-person shooters being PlanetSide 2, Firefall. There are a number of others. RTS will eventually make its way too. And so a lot of the standard MMORPG tropes aren't going to be quite so true anymore. And I also think globalization is going to be really big. We're part of a Chinese company, and they have a ton of MMOs. And they're very successful in the US. I can't give you the numbers, obviously. But I think that that's going to come more and more true. You're going to be seeing a lot of cross-pollinating. That already exists between Korea and America, but not so much between China and America. And I think that that's going to be continuing a lot on both sides. It's really, really cool to be there and see it from both sides of the ocean.
Cool. Dave, what about you? I mean, this is titled EverQuest Next. Alone, emphasize next. So.
It's very difficult to talk about EQ Next right now because we're supposed to be in a black box. It's kind of a dark gray box now, but it's still supposed to be a black box. Well, it's no surprise that I'm a fan of sandbox games. I built Tribes 2 in the original PlanetSide, and some of my favorite games have been like Ultima Online and the RVR stuff in Daok. These just fantastic models to use, and most of the stuff that we've learned from the kind of game has not really been applied to what we think of as a core high fantasy MMO in the past. Certainly not with RPGs, and I think that there's a lot of room to go with that. Obviously, we're chasing that a lot. Our president has mentioned many times that we're building a sandbox game, so that's not a surprise. But one of the really cool things about a sandbox game is that the players can do anything that they want to and go in any path that they want to and be able to pursue the role that they choose to pursue. And that kind of aspect has never been seriously pushed in an MMO, letting people be completely freeform and be able to do the things that they want to do. That combined with all the cloud of peripherals that are starting to surround these games and being able to interact with it, and in fact the actual physical peripherals on how you interact with a game. Lots of people have heard of Google Glass and everything like that, but those arm wristbands where you can tap your hand and be able to tell exactly which fingers you're using. There's a lot of crazy stuff that will change about how we interact with the games, and all of that stuff can be investigated now and extrapolated and planned for in the future. So there's a lot of really cool stuff happening.
Chris, you come from a unique perspective building Star Citizen because you're building not only multiple player experiences, big battlegrounds in the galaxy you're going to create, plus exploration, and also go into that kind of solo experience as well. So how are you bouncing it? Where do you see things going?
Well, I mean, I think there's going to be a new trend where you're going to see a blend between sort of the single player experience and the multiplayer experience. I mean, Bungie just made a big announcement with Destiny, which is sort of the shared, persistent world where it's sort of ostensibly a single player experience that other people can join, which was pretty much, I think, pioneered by Demon's Souls back a few years ago on the PS3, which I thought was a fantastic game. And was, in a lot of ways, some of the things I was doing pretty inspirational, because I think you always want to have this balance between a sort of personal experience when you just want to play yourself, and then sort of the collaborative social experience that you can have when you've got your friends or you want to fight against other players. And I think that you're probably going to, I would say that, for me anyway, as a player, what I'd like to play is a game that is able to sort of do all those seamlessly in the same kind of world, so it sort of tailors itself to me. So I'm a lone wolf, I don't feel like I'm hamstrung, I don't have 5 people playing with me, but if I have a bunch of friends with me and we can really work that, in my game, that trading run really well, or that pirate base really well, then it is beneficial. But in the real world, you can be a lone wolf and be successful, or you can work in a group and be successful. And I think that's probably the challenge, because what's in the past, when in any way the MMOs I've played, it sort of feels like you're either in the, you've got to put your group together to really sort of achieve the quest and level up properly, or else you're at a big disadvantage, or it's very sort of specific scripted content, and as Palace alluded down to my right, that's you can never create that quick enough for the audience you've got. I mean, that's the big the Old Republic problem is it's really high quality, but it's the amount of effort that goes into creating those quests takes forever. So I think there's a balance, and I think then the other thing is key, which everyone else has alluded to. I mean, I'm not like rocket science here. Is I think you really have to have your community, the people that are playing the game, have to be actively sort of participating in the creation of content. So we don't have wargaming.net here, but they're just a straight PvP. There's no persistence, but they say we're free to play, not because it's a marketing technique, but the people that are playing for free are actually generating content for us, because the people that are paying have someone to play against. And so I think you have to think sort of differently about the sort of multiplayer experience than, say, maybe I used to do in the past 10 or 15 years ago when I was building single player games. And it's about how to balance those various things and react to the community, so they feel like their actions have effects on the world, and it means something, because that for me is the thing that I'd like to see going forward. I mean, that's something I'm focusing on, is I want the world in Star Citizen to feel like it has time passes and things happen. Your ship gets more worn and beaten up, your character gets more worn and beaten up the more times he has a near-death experience. And you can actually see age and life, and even people pass on. Your character eventually dies, and your next of kin comes in, or your successor comes in, and you have a sense of history that you can build up, that the players actually build up in the universe itself, and that's the kind of world I want to play. So that's sort of what I'm trying to build in Star Citizen. But I think that a lot of people sort of go to that because it's more like the real world. It's just how we get there.
Cool. Matt, you coming in with Elder Scrolls, you're going from a really classic single-player RPG and opening up that world. I actually make the joke that I play Skyrim to relax. I know that sounds silly. But so, I mean, what is that like for you, going into that single solo player that Todd created so well? Now you guys have the online version. So what is that like to make the switch?
Yeah, when you're on panels like this, you get time to think about your perfect answer that you're going to craft, and Chris said exactly what I was going to say.
I was trying to think of mine. I mean, everyone basically nails it down here. So.
But the way Garrett asked the question, it's actually right, is that you can't really force players into a play style anymore. Like EQ1, for example, which is an awesome game, but it really forced you into, if you didn't group, you didn't play, because you couldn't get above a certain level, because you just couldn't do it. And when you take a game like an IP in games like Elder Scrolls, like Oblivion and Skyrim, and you take them online, you really have to make sure that you actually give players the experience that they're used to, which is, hey, I log in and I can do this thing solo, and then I can go craft the next day, and I can do all these different things. So instead of making a game, you're more making a world with lots of little games in it. And one of those games is a solo game, and you want to be sure they can explore the whole territory, and you give them a crafting system where they can make stuff. But that's when the multiplayer stuff comes in. It's in Skyrim. You make the stuff and you use it, or you sell it to a shopkeeper. And in an ESO, you can make it and sell it to another player, and that's where the whole multiplayer economy comes in. So if you want to play ESO like you play Skyrim, you could do that, but you have a whole market for your goods if you're a crafter, for example. And that's not forcing anyone into a play style. It's kind of letting people figure out what it is they want to do when they log in and do it. I think that's kind of one of the future aspects of these games, of the big MMOs, is don't force anyone into anything. Let them figure out how to use their own social networks to do things, and let them kind of live in a world instead of forcing something on them.
I know our forums are always very happy with the word sandbox, right, Mike? They love it. So. We can't make fun of Star Wars, by the way, because Gabe is sitting over there. Anyways, Joe and Terry, if you guys want to take the mics out to the audience. Guys, listen, we talk a lot, and I'm lucky enough to see some of these games really early on. We'd love to get you guys to line up right here and go to the mics, and we'll just start taking questions from the audience. It's really about your questions for these guys and where you see online games going. You're the ones who spend hours in the worlds and playing all the games. So we're happy to take fan questions. This is really what the panels, and especially what PAX is all about. So, start with you, Jeff. We can just quiet down so everybody can hear the questions.
So I have a question about kind of opening up the games and giving more control to the players. To anybody on the panel who has a good idea or thought about this, what about the kind of the social constructs that go with that? The more control you give to the players, the more there is for people who are, not like just want to ruin everyone's day. And then you got to make a lot of people happy. There's going to be people who are going to try to work against that.
I think the question is really about kind of players, and it goes back to Ultima, where we had player killers, where I'm trying to convince my son not to be a criminal when we play Ultima sometimes. But it's true. Do you guys put checks and balances in the games to realize that there are players out there that kind of go after other people and make their experiences poor? And I think it's come a long way in the last 15 years.
I can hum a few bars of that. So my background, I founded Turbine, which did Asheron's Call. So we put in the Allegiance system very specifically. What this was is before that, newbies were ganked. They were a source of gold pieces for other players in, say, Ultima Online. And so we put in a system where they were valuable, and the more you helped a newbie, the more benefits you got. You got XP. As they earned XP, it was like a little pyramid scheme to go and level up. And so people treated newbies better. And then I worked with Jack on City of Heroes, and we put in the mentoring system, the sidekick system, so that you could have your low-level buddies actually work with you when you were higher levels, so you can encourage those social bonds. They're super important. You play the games that your friends play, which is a weird tautology, but you do. You don't want to play alone. You want to play near your friends, if nothing else, in the same game that they're doing. And so anything that helps social bonding is good. We take settlers. Settlers are a socializer path. They can put down a campfire anywhere in the world, and the campfire gives a buff to those using it. Go with the campfire, you get a strength buff. Well, every time someone uses their campfire, the settler gets settler XP. They get path XP, so they become better at doing social rewards. This is a cool puzzle because now where do you place your campfire where the most people use it? You can't look it up online, because if it's online, everybody goes and puts it where they say online, oh, put it in the city. Oh, now the city's full of campfires, no one uses them. You have to seek out a place where you can help the most other people in the game. And you get rewarded for figuring out the cleverest way to help other people. Like, that's fun game design to do. Like, that's a very interesting sort of puzzle, and it makes the game better because you have people actually fighting to say, who can I help the most?
We'll go over. Oh, go ahead, John. I was actually going to say.
Okay, like this stuff, like it's all about how you design the game. Like, you don't have to make it so that this is the part where we are in control, even though the players are in control of the content. Like, you are giving them the tools, and you don't have to give them the tools to grief each other. And if you give them those tools, they absolutely will. There's, we spent, what was it, 15 years of MMOs mob tagging. We didn't have to have that, and we don't have to have it anymore. And it's all about figuring out what rules you're going to give them. You're not going to give them a sandbox and then just 2 knives. You have to figure out what tools they have and what tools you're going to give them, and building those tools, you're still going to be able to make as like game developers the decisions that create these interactions that are not possible.
I was going to say, John, one of the things with Guild Wars 2 for me was the fact that I could fight any monster at any moment, help another player up, and still get XP for it, and they would as well. And I think that shifted my gameplay when I started. Terry, you want to go get through the questions quick?
Yes, I just got a question because I'm a little bit worried about Adobe Flash. I wanted to make Flash games in the future and maybe even make a living, or not really a living, but some money off of it. And I've heard that ever since HTML5 came in, Adobe's been slowly going down the drain. And so I want to know if it's going to be there in the next decade.
Who's the techie who can answer?
I'm not a big fan of Flash, I'll tell you that. So I would say that Flash I don't think will be the long-term platform you would want for gaming. There's plenty of other good options to do some interesting stuff in. Unity is a very easy system to build inside, and you don't really have to be a brilliant programmer or anything to do stuff in Unity. In fact, artists and designers can make great game stuff inside that. There's more powerful engines like Unreal and CryEngine and that kind of stuff. But Flash, I think, honestly, is going to be a bit limiting, and it has some issues like certain support on mobile platforms and stuff. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Just to add something, I'm one of the few people that was an idiot enough to try to build an MMO out of Flash. And so when I was working at Guy Online, we built this big, huge social hub thing. And my advice is don't.
Go ahead.
I just came from a WildStar presentation from Jeremy, who at least was a bombshell to me that no matter what MMO you come out with, there's always 2 or 3 million people that will buy the game and then a month later stop playing it. So my question is really simple. How will you or do you judge if your game's going to be a success?
That's a big question.
Go ahead. Well, first, what's the fan reaction like? Second, what are reviews like? Third, are you paying your bills? I mean, it really comes down to that, right? I mean, if a game attracts 1 million users, I mean, great, right? But in the end of the day, we have devs who spent years making these games. So those are at least my 3 criteria, right? Fans like it, how are our reviews, how are we making the money?
There's a really interesting phenomenon, which is good games, even good games, people churn out. You take a game like World of Warcraft, it's had a super long lifetime. They churn, I don't know the numbers, I don't work there, but it's on the order of 5% of their users churn out maybe a month, 10% depending on the month. And so here's math for you, here comes the science. What this means is that let's suppose 5% of users churn out of the game, that's an excellent rate. That means every 20 months, everybody left. And they've been replaced, you sold new users, you sold new games, you've recaptured people, but retention is everything. And the awesome thing about our industry is that good games retain people and bad games in general don't. Because you can put pretty marketing on a box and sell a bunch of boxes. That's why I made the comment in the last panel. It's not every game does it, Secret World, I don't think they crossed the million box sales, but games that did. Conan did, Warhammer Online, Eve has over time,
City Heroes did.
City Heroes did, most games, can move 1 million boxes plus. So there's 1 million people interested in the game. But it's so hard to retain the people who play the game. And the best part is that if you have good game design, that leads to retention, which leads to people playing. In our industry, the Will Wrights of the world, the people who make really good game design, I think get rewarded over time. In the box industry, it's not the case. It's often dependent on marketing. It's often dependent on hype. In the long haul, our industry is not, which I think is strong.
And I'll add one other thing, at least in my case. Be free to play. It's real simple. Look, if you want to play our game, play it. If you don't want to play it, okay, all you did was install the game, you tried it, you didn't like it. And you know what? It's still going to be there. You can come back in 3 months. There's no barrier to entry. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. You can come and go as you want. So that we're not worried about retention. We're just worried about creating a fun game, and you'll come back. Because, like Jeremy said, there is this churn. There are people that come and go. But it's totally fine, at least from my perspective and what we've learned from Star Trek and Champions, yeah, people come and go. But that's all right. They come back if it's good. So.
Yeah, that's the way I feel on EQ and EQ2 also. I mean, those games have been running for 14 and 9 years respectively. And the reason why people keep going away and then coming back and going away and coming back is because MMOs are a weird duck. The longer they last, the better they get. It's not like most games. So, you know, when you keep a team on it and you continue to build features and you continue to build depth and everything like that, that really shows. Even when the game engine looks old, the game itself can actually be fantastic. And so we kind of measure success at SOE by how long the game lasts and how long the fans stick with it and don't fade away. If they go away and come back, that's totally cool. That means you won.
That's true. Actually, Jeremy, you mentioned a good point. I wanted to throw it over to Matt, which is you talk about 1 million box sales. Whereas, Matt, you experienced just recently the Facebook boom that ESO had and got your 1 million likes on Facebook. What's it like now with the social tools? Because you can talk about it, how that kind of shifted your you know, the way Elder Scrolls was working.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, with 1 million Facebook likes, it's apparent that there's a lot of people very interested in the game. You know, you have to worry a lot about day one and making sure the players get in and have a, you know, good, smooth experience when you're talking about that many people hitting the servers all at once. The Star Wars guys can attest to that because they had a pretty ginormous first 10-day sales. So, you know, so you, yeah, and the SimCity guys is I just want to point out that he said it, not me. So, but seriously, you have to design for a big crush of people in the beginning, and you need to make sure that you have enough content to keep them for the long term. You really need to design, you know, the game that you want people to play 50 hours, 150 hours, 250 hours. You have to design that up front. You know, you can't just do that after the game launches. You have to make sure that you're launching with a game that people can really get in and play and have fun immediately, and then they kind of understand as they go on kind of how full-featured and rich it is, and you keep finding new things and new ways to do things over the lifespan of the game. And that's how you build a long-term community, because we all know games that last longer than, you know, 6, 8, 10 months and really go big and be successful, it's the community that drives it. It's not really game features. There's definitely a level that games hit, and when there's that many people logging in, it just keeps rolling from there. And that's actually the target that we're all going for, is making sure you get enough people in there, enough critical mass, and then it kind of goes.
Go ahead, Terry.
Hi. So City of Heroes has come up quite a bit, and interestingly enough, that's the first major dead MMO that I can think of. So I guess it's a little bit of a darker question, but is this kind of what players need to prepare themselves for? Is this inevitable, and how do you guys protect your games, and how far ahead do you plan to keep them around?
I don't know.
They should never die. They should never die. I mean, if you continue to develop the game and you continue to feed your fans what they want and everything like that, you should be able to keep those alive. It's only when something really drastic happens that's business oriented that, I mean, City of Heroes shouldn't have died, damn it. That was a great game. MMOs are built to last forever. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to play EverQuest in 2050. It's just, it's one of those things. So yeah, I mean, that's my soapbox, but there should be no shelf life on these things.
So I was executive producer on the NCSoft side for City Heroes, and then and I'm going to strongly agree, I don't think we should shut down games almost ever. I mean, you look at Brian Green's out there, he's got, what, Gemstone 3 is still alive, for God's sake, you know, with plugging away and keeping it with near-death studios, which is the best thing ever. There's no reason not to keep them alive, or when there are reasons, it's on the business side. And so even as an NCSoft employee,
I'll tell you what, Jeremy, just tell anybody at NCSoft, pick up the phone, I'm there. Let's talk about City Heroes, give me a call.
I'll say on my side that you know, I think there are several things that you could do. I mean, obviously it becomes more difficult when you're part of a much bigger company because there's a whole different sort of cost structure which makes the expenses. You know, if you're a big company, you just have more expenses and therefore the cost of running it. Generally, it's always about, is the game bringing in enough money to at least cover its outgoing costs. But I mean, there's some other things you can do. So like we are trying on Starters, and we did on Freelance have the ability for people to run their own servers and host it. And it's not going to be as big as, say, the full persistent universe, but you'll certainly be able to host a server and have, you know, 100, 200 people play in your universal world. And in that case, yeah, the game's always going to be there for you. I mean, I have to say that Freelance is a really great example of this. I mean, the game shipped in 2003, and there is still a very large and strong active base playing it, running their own servers. And Microsoft stopped supporting it essentially in 2003 or 4 because they were focusing on the Xbox, and that was what they really cared about. But the users have kept Freelance going. You can still go there and you can go to all the different modding pages, and a lot of them are all in Germany, but there's ones here in the US too. And they're running servers, and there's different servers you can go to. So I think if you can provide some tools for your community in a way that maybe they can take off some of the load, that would definitely help. And then the other thing is just figuring out a way that your infrastructure costs are cheap enough that it makes it economically valuable to run it. So I think everybody probably at this panel, I mean, I know I am, but I'm pretty sure everyone else is figuring out, hey, how can we do this so it's more scalable, we can bring it up and down quickly, we don't have these huge dedicated data centers that cost us a lot of money. So, I'm definitely looking at sort of more cloud-based solutions in some cases, because that allows you to sort of scale up and down occasionally. But all those things and stuff. But I think definitely, your goal should be this universe should live forever. That's the whole idea of it.
Cool. Thanks. It's a tough question, but it was a good one. Go ahead.
Gentlemen, what do you think the use of mobile devices in the creation of your games outside of just microtransactions?
That's another really good one.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Right. It's creating an integrated game experience so that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you can feel part of your game. So, for instance, Wildstorm. Being able to, from my mobile phone, or what did you call the classes? Settler. If there were mechanics for my settler that my mobile phone I could do, whether it's mini games or even something with my character, so I could progress my settler path. So that even, I don't know about you guys, I'm not at a PC as much as I was 10 years ago. But I am near my iPad and my iPhone. And it's much easier to log in and do it. So I think somebody said it very simply. It's the future. To what degree it is, for instance, whether it's attaching to the game or whether it's like Order and Chaos, where like you are literally playing on an iPad. That's up to debate, but I completely agree.
I'm not going to take the total contrarian view, because obviously this is where things are going. But I find it amusing, and I say this all the time, that Macintosh is first shipped with a 9-inch screen, and then they spent 20 years evolving to cool 27-inch screens, and now we have to go back to a 10-inch screen. So it's like, I like the big screens. When the next round of mobile devices comes out, you can actually play. You can actually use it as a tablet and then plug in, so you get a nice big. That's when things really going to blow up, because that's when you can take it with it. You can play it small. You can play it big.
Yeah, I definitely think for the high-end sort of game. Sort of the mobile devices aren't there yet, but they certainly are going to be sort of complementary, like saying you advance a certain mechanic, or in case you start citizen, you can check in, see what the stock market's doing, all that kind of stuff. Set up missions that you can fly once you get to your computer. But I do think long term what will happen is there will be basically a tablet-like PC that when you walk into your living room, it will connect wirelessly to your TV and controller, and you can sit and play a sort of console experience. You go to your office, it will connect wirelessly to your monitor and keyboard, and that will be the future. But it's a ways off just because of performance issues and heat issues. And there is a reason why there's a PC. High-end gaming rig is this big and has power units that draw 850, 1,000 watts and require a huge amount of cooling. It's just because graphics power and CPU power like that requires that power and cooling, and you just couldn't put it in a small form factor at the moment. But 10 years ago, things were very different. I mean, my iPhone is a lot more powerful than the $5,000 PC you used to have to play Wing Commander with. So maybe what I'm suggesting will come sooner than I think it will. But in the foreseeable future, I think in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, still PCs will be sort of the highest end of the gaming. But I think the mobile side and the tablet side definitely is going to catch up. And you're going to start to see it complementing the gameplay, and then maybe it can be either or.
We wouldn't have all those fan sites out there if people didn't want to stay connected to their game all the time. So this is just another way to get them even more involved when they're not there. I mean, everybody wants to know what's going on, if there's a raid going on, or if there's marketplace stuff going on, or whatever it is. Everybody wants that stuff all the time, and the more that you can interact with it, the better it is. So yeah, I mean, we're still making PC games, and we're still using those as the main hub, and that's going to be part of it for a long time. But yeah, this other stuff is going to add in fast, really fast.
I think so. I think a great example of that was John. You guys did a patch one day, and Guild Wars 2 was, I think, down for a very short period of time. Our forums just exploded at MMO. Made Mike's head ache for a while as community manager. But it's the type of thing where either you're playing the game, you're logged into the game. One of the coolest features a while back was the idea that the cell phone would call you and tell you stuff was getting done in the game. I know Destiny kind of showed a little bit of it. I know the Agency, which was a game that SOE was working on, they had a spy network, and you would actually get phone calls from the spy network.
Who remembers Majestic? The most badly timed game ever. Yes, yeah. The game about terrorism right before 9/11.
That's right.
And it was the game with so many emails and faxes and stuff. I mean,
you know, about like horrible events happening in the world. That was well done.
Yeah.
That didn't take me. So cool. Go ahead.
In Final Fantasy 11 and 14, you can level every class on just one character. Why don't more MMOs let you do that?
That's a really good question.
Actually, the answer is pretty simple. It's because we, either through sheer stupidity or through the data we saw, is that players play to play with other players. They play with their friends do. And actually, Jeremy was the one who tutored me on this, really. And that is, if a single character is capable of leveling up in everything, then he doesn't need anyone else. And the minute he doesn't need anyone else, he's not going to play with anyone else. If he doesn't play with anybody else, well, he's not going to play. And that was what we thought. Now, I don't think that's necessarily true, but in our defense, 10 years ago, I would say that was pretty crap. That thing.
Yeah, we're on Elder Scrolls Online. Obviously, it's got some class-based elements, but you can learn, you know, the vast majority of skill lines and abilities any class can learn. A lot of them you have to go out in the world and find. And you're only limited by the number of skill points that you want to put into it, but you can also go out in the world and find extra skill points. So, which is why when you get to the level cap, which is 50, you can still go on learning new abilities and putting, you know, assigning things to them. I mean, you can eventually, if you put enough time into it, you know, you can't do them all, but you can do a great majority of the abilities. You know, if you put in that time in Skyrim, you'll know exactly what that system's like. So, the big problem with that, and Jack was kind of skirting around the issue, is that it's hard as hell to balance that. You know, if you can do if you let the players do anything, they will do anything. So, you know, you have to put some constraints on it, especially in PvP-based games, which most MMOs have some kind of PvP component. You don't want basically the first time a player finds something that's 1% more powerful in a build, 98% of your players would be that build within like 4 days. So, you know, you have to make sure that doesn't happen because everyone wants to win. So that's why there's constraints. But, you know, you want to give players some freedom inside of those constraints. So they don't feel like, you know, I'm the same as everyone else. Those designers suck.
You know, so. I think it's a little more basic than that too. Like, there's another fundamental thing. Like, for us, I can tell you exactly why we do it. One of the important decisions you make, and decisions you make need to be permanent sometimes, is your character. And like, this is a role-playing game. Like, it's like, at least for me, what's fun about like D&D is not like always min-maxing and eventually just like killing everything, right? It's like the role-playing, and you can't play a role if you can play every role. So there's literally a reason why we did it in Guild Wars 2 is like, we want you to think like, this guy, this is my warrior, like what is his story? He likes to kill rabbits with axes, like whatever it is, whatever that character is, like that's an important part of your character. That's why there have to be permanence, and you know, so it's like one of the best, most clear permanent decisions that you can give players.
So I'll just, because I have an interesting perspective on this, because I'm pretty contrary to all this. I actually think that you know, you should be able to choose whatever profession you want to do, and how you perform in your profession will sort of indicate whether you want to, you know, if I'm not particularly good at dogfighting, I probably, in Star Citizen's case, I probably do not want to be a mercenary or a bounty hunter. Maybe I want to be a merchant or a trader. But I'm not prevented, even if I'm a really bad dogfighter, from taking some bounty hunter missions and doing that. And I actually, that's one of the immersion breaking things for me, to be honest with you, is, I mean, I know we're talking role playing, but I think that as a person I should say, okay, you know, I want to try and take this combat role on, or I want to try and take this merchant passive role. And I think there's not particularly, I think let me say, I'm not going to say there isn't a good reason not to do it, because I wouldn't be particularly fair. I want to know a lot more about MMO games than me, but I'm certainly going to try to make it be more profession-based, and you basically take the jobs, and I feel you'll sort of gravitate to the play style that will be applicable to you. But if you want to sort of switch halfway in, you're a mercenary, and now you decide you want to be a pirate, right, you can be a pirate. Or now you decide you want to hang up your dogfighting shoes and become a merchant, and you can do that. But I actually like the ability to have that freedom. I find it breaks the immersion for me if I'm sort of, I'm a warrior and I have to be a warrior and I can never change it. That's just my pet MMO.
I agree with Chris. Let's say I have a character that I really, really like, and I've named him, and I wrote a background for him, and I figured out what he looks like, and I decorated his house, and all this other stuff. I don't feel like I should have to be relegated to a single class. I don't feel like that's a restriction that needs to happen. And I do believe that there are ways to balance the game to be able to let you have more choice. Because ultimately this is a role-playing game, and you should be able to play the role that you want to play without necessarily having to recreate another character, in my opinion. And I think that there's a lot of ways we can go down those paths so that they're really interesting and very cool for the players, and we'll be pushing that a lot farther.
Go ahead, Joe. We're running a little short on time. We only got a few minutes left, so we'll try to do questions as quickly as we can.
Okay, I just wanted to say I have to say I really enjoy hearing everybody online. I still play to this day. So my question comes as how do you feel about Shroud of the Avatar and how he's approaching multiplayer with that?
Well, see, by count, on this panel are at least 4 designers who have worked with Richard in some fashion. I think Richard said that every designer he worked with was lazy.
I know, he actually said I was good, but other than that.
Richard doesn't know me, so I'm okay.
If Richard said lazy and a jerk, then I know he was talking about me. But
I'm having lunch with Richard on Wednesday down in San Francisco, so now I'm going to get nervous when he says, "Hey, with the panel, what happened?" I'll say, "Hey, about that comment, what happened?"
I'm definitely going to play that game. I don't think anybody up here isn't going to play that game because we all grew up with those games. I mean, geez, Ultima 4, are you kidding me?
Yeah, 4 for the.
I'll slightly in Richard's defense. I think he was trying to make a valid point and didn't make it very well. He was trying to sort of be a sensationalist in a statement to a journalist and wasn't realizing that that's what the headline was going to be. But he was just sort of trying to make the point, which is true, by the way. And this isn't exclusive to video games. This is for every sort of entertainment collaborative medium. I mean, most of the people that make movies aren't particularly. I mean, it's how many times you see a really great movie? How many times you play a really great game? How many times you listen to a really great record? 100% of people making movies, making records can't be all brilliant. So there's some people that do good jobs, and there's some people that aren't quite so good, and some people in the middle. But there's a lot of talent all through our industry at all the levels. And I think Richard was unfortunately trying to make a point that the designing side of it really doesn't have a great structure in terms of learning how to do it. You can go to school to learn how to program and do art much easier than you can game design, because game design is very sort of nebulous, and there's lots of features and functions, and there's also several levels of game design. So there's the sort of, I'm designing the overall game, the big vision of it, and then there's designing the elements, like you're designing levels or missions, or designing a combat system, and that's sort of small bits that go into a whole. And in general, when Richard was referring to people coming out of QA and doing stuff, it was more on the more like first getting into the business. So there are definitely, when you play a game and you go, okay, hey, I can do it better. It's like I watch a movie or I watch a TV show, and I can do that better. But there's a lot of work that gets to making it, and so it just takes time. And so our industry definitely needs a place where we invest more in how people learn how to design and build games, and we nurture it, because it's really kind of not very well defined. And he was trying to make that point, and he made it in an incredibly inelegant way, because there's a huge amount of talented people in this business, all in this panel, and all the rest of our meet, and everyone has
great ideas, and if anyone is in game design, you will know that you cannot be lazy making games. It's a you know, a lot of times it can be 6-7 days a week and 16 hours a day, so that is not my definition of lazy. So big.
No, it's true. Actually, but just to bring it back to Ultima real quick, for me personally playing games, I grew up on Atari and Dungeons & Dragons. I got to Ultima Online. I could never go back. I had to play an MMO every time they came out. And I think it's that it shapes your consciousness as a player and as these guys as developers. Once you see something done a certain way, that's it. Things don't go back. For me personally, I think Guild Wars 2 did that too. I think that some of the design concepts they had and some of the ways they did things, I could never go back. And I think you've seen those tiers in every genre we've all worked in, from Ultima to Dark Ages to City Heroes to to now, which we're getting into with the funding like Star Citizen and Neverwinter. The combat mechanics are starting to see come into MMOs. So for me, it really does shape your consciousness on how things go. And like I said, once you see something really new that hits you, and Ultima was that for me. So definitely changed. Go ahead.
Retention is really important in game design for online gaming, obviously. And there needs to be reasons for the players to log in as often as possible. Something that always annoys me in a game is when I feel if I spend 3 days off at PAX or whatever, I'm suddenly 3 days behind on the bench. Should the player who plays 1 day every day for a week be rewarded more than the player who plays 7 hours over the weekend?
Well, that's a good question.
We debate that all.
Yeah. Did everyone hear what he said? He said it's tough sometimes, especially with MMOs, that you play them. If you go on a vacation for 2 weeks, you're suddenly lost in the shuffle. Your guild is 10 levels ahead of you, and they're rating bosses, and they're like, "No, dude."
So, I think number one, if it gets to those mobile peripheries we talked about, so that if ideally you can connect into your game and continue those activities, that's great. But I think there's actually a second question. And that is, should the person who plays 1 hour a day, every day, be any worse off than somebody who plays 1 day for 7 hours? And I'll just say no.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And in fact, Jack did it the best of anybody so far. The City Hero stuff, for being able to play with anybody at any time, was the best in the industry.
And don't forget, I had Jeremy's help. So. Sorry.
Next week, we love Jack. It was fantastic, yeah.
Got my point. Do you want to do a speed round of as fast answers as possible?
Do as quick as we can. We'll do 2 minutes of speed round, so go ahead.
First, Jeremy, I know you said you found Turbine and you did a lot of work with Asheron's Call. Thank you. It's probably the best MMO I've ever played. In relation to that, when I heard about Elder Scrolls Online saying, oh, you can be a battle mage, whatever, that triggered that, because that's what all Asheron's Call was about, was doing anything you want. A lot of games have made that claim. How can you design that to really fit around the player and say, okay, well, yes, you can do everything, but this isn't nerfed, this isn't too powerful. How do you balance that?
I think the statement is you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So you have to look at it that way. You give the player the freedom, but the freedom sometimes involves making A/B choices where they can't get something if they choose something else. So you limit it by letting them choose how they're limiting themselves by their own choices, and that's how you do it.
Cool. Go ahead.
You've all brought up user-generated content to some extent, but since this is the future of online games, is user-generated content the future? Will developers bother writing content for their games? Will they just package their game and a foundry?
So I think that what you'll find is that the future of the online games is the past of online games in many ways. I mean, we're all probably old school anyway, so that's part of that. The reason why, in my day, the reason you almost flunked out of college was LP mods, Show of hands, anyone who knows what the word LP mod is? Yeah, old school. And LP mods were text-based MMOs that got as huge as 100 concurrent users. And the reward for getting really high level was often being given the ability to go make stuff in the game and go make the next set of rooms become a mod and an admin. And so it's only because MMOs are so damn slow to make that we're seeing our generation, I think, really hitting that now. But that was true in literally the late 80s. You were seeing that kind of stuff. So yes, I think it's the future, but it's also the past.
We need a big hit UGC thing, because right now you'd be kind of insane to just put out a UGC product that's only UGC. You need professional content to go along with it. But in the near future, people are going to get real good at that stuff. and they're not necessarily going to be working at the company, and then the possibilities open up. If we're talking about the future, yeah, UGC will only get stronger, not weaker.
So sort of a tag along, how do you really incentivize good user content? Or good user content? You don't get a great system.
I'll try one. So what we're going to try and do at Star Citizen, because I'm a big fan of the modding community, and I said that's how I brought Freelancer Alive so long, is obviously if you're running your own server, you can do whatever you want with modding, but inside the universe we're building, we need to curate it because you've got to make sure that it fits inside the dynamics of the universe and doesn't unbalance things and all the rest of it. So, but what we're going to do is sort of almost run it like, say, you're the US government and I'm putting out a contract for a new tank, or in our case, a new spaceship or a new weapon. And we put it out to the community and we say, here are the specs, this is what it's going to be, give us your designs, and then the community will essentially vote on the designs they like the best, and the winners of that design will go into the game and will be sold to some of the shops in the game. The revenue from those shops will be split with the users that designed it. So that's kind of how we're thinking of incentivizing the community. And we're already seeing it, even on, we're almost 2 years out from being a fully live game. We're going to be releasing some modules before that, 2 years from. But we already have users that are building spaceships and designing weapons. And by the way, it's like high-grade, professional, beautiful 3D art and incredibly impressive. So I think definitely user-generated content is a big part of some sandbox multiplayer experiences.
And that's the hardest question in online games. Whoever solves that properly will make trillions of dollars.
So, real simple how we're handling it in Neverwinter. Look at YouTube, right? Just ranking things and people liking them and so forth. That's number one. The basket will rise to the top. Number two, if you like something that somebody created, you get to tip them with in-game currency. So that person can use that in-game currency to buy the same elite gear that somebody doing dungeon runs has.
I mean, even pretty sure this is actually an MMO at this point. Team Fortress 2. That game is already doing this, right? So.
Yeah, we're doing it in EQ and EQ2 with Player Studio already too. So players are already making assets like cloaks and swords and stuff like that, and selling it to each other through the shop. That's tip of the iceberg stuff.
Cool. Guys, listen, I gotta shut the panel down. We get the time. I know it's terrible. So listen, guys. Yeah, just definitely check out the games on the show floor.
Yeah, come up and ask us questions. I think most of us can be around.
We'll be here for a few minutes, and I can't thank Jeremy, John, Jack, Dave, Chris, and Matt enough.